So yeah, branding. It's one of those words that is kind of gross. Has been, ruined by capitalism, by like so many other things.
It can be pretty dirty, but
Has baggage.
yeah.
But I do feel that as an artist, it is something that you need to think about and consider. And even as a human being, we show up in different ways in the world, and we have to decide what masks we're wearing, in different situations. And I think as an artist, when you're presenting yourself to the world, you kind of have to make a similar decision. And I guess the problem with branding, and we do talk about this in the interviews, is that to create a brand, the way that marketing is taught, I guess, is that you sort of have to boil yourself down to like one thing, and that's the thing that you present. That's your brand. And Eva talks about this, about how she is taking all these really beautiful like photos of herself, really beautiful art that she's creating, but obviously there's a lot more to her than that. And how she's garnering success for these photos that she's putting out on Instagram, but then she doesn't just want to do that. She doesn't just want to be known for that, because there are other facets to what she's doing. So yeah, it's just interesting to me to think about.
Yeah. I think it's changed quite a lot. I think it's changing now, what it all is and what it all means. Because, like, yeah, I mean, of course, like the history is branding businesses, marketing businesses, but like we're in a new age now, I think, where we're really like able to focus in on, like you're saying, idiosyncratic parts that make us different, the stuff that we're bullied for in school or whatever, and then now we can like use that as a sounding off point, for the things that we believe in and the things that we can see in the world and the things that we can point out to people that we have experienced or whatever. So, and I think like people do want variation now more, because it's like we've been so used to this kind of like mono things being very specific. You only say one thing, you only do one thing, you only, right, because everyone's going to get confused otherwise. Oh, you get so confused. Oh, you can't do two things, one thing only, please. It's like we're kind of a bit bored as consumers
Mm.
of that. It's like, yeah, whatever. Like if I want to do actually you can see it in the trending on social media and YouTube and stuff, that people do something like different. It hits because it's like it's unexpected, and I think we do want things that are unexpected. That's not to say that we do need some cohesion, and we do need like some sort of like to ground it in
Well,
a
but
specific.
maybe the cohesion is just who you are. It's always going to be you showing up to put that stuff out there and put your spin
True.
on it and your opinions. I watched a really great interview actually with ContraPoints, who's one of my favorite YouTubers, and she makes really varied videos. Like she talks about philosophy, about politics, about gender. Her most recent video is a 3 hour video that is about Twilight, the Twilight series, but
Vaguely.
it encompasses, lots of different themes as well. And she was talking about how the audience that she's built kind of trust her to just sort of take them where her interests are at that current moment, and
Cool.
give them what it is that makes her unique, makes her voice unique. I mean, I have no interest in Twilight. I've never read any of the books or watched any of the movies, but I sat there and watched that whole 3 hour video because it's just so fascinating how she just uses the story, to jump off and go into all these other areas.
That's
But she's
good.
talking about how I think a big part of what the audience likes is her process of like figuring out what it is that she's putting across in the video and creating these videos, which she does all by herself. She's got like, millions of subscribers, yet she's just making these videos by herself in her apartment. And she's completely Patreon funded. It's just really inspiring because it's just like, I'm just going to make a video about what interests me. And, another thing she said that, people were saying that, oh, people only like 10-minute videos on YouTube because everyone has a short attention span. But that's also a lie, a bit like what you were just saying about, oh, well, people can only handle one thing at a time. I do think a lot of what we've been told comes from this like capitalist view
And maybe it
of
was true at
things.
one time, but I don't think it's true now, and I think it is changing. And we all have the ability to be able to experiment and like do what we want. Like nothing is stopping us from doing exactly what we want, more or less.
Mm.
Like, I mean, maybe YouTube could like suspend your video because it doesn't go into its guidelines. Like, I mean, YouTube is a private business that is privately owned, and they can say we don't want that. So like, we're not 100, but we're basically mostly free to do whatever. So experiment, do something different. Like
Well, that's
what?
another thing that Eva comes up against with Instagram, constantly like trying to ban her photos because she's got like her naked body, and not even fully naked, but just, parts of her body that they deem
Hmm.
unacceptable for Instagram. So yeah.
Yeah, good for her. It's good. It means that she's on the right course. I think if you're upsetting people, I think it's then you're doing the right work. That's the way I see it. Like, it's a good thing.
Mm.
So well done to her for that. Like, yeah, bravo.
Mm.
It's good. I'm glad. We need to challenge it. Need to be challenging things because, like, it's like we live in this world of fear of like this racist, prejudiced, classist, um, you know, uh, just you name it, and there's fear around it, and that. So we need to like just speak up about what we believe in, and if that upsets people, then good.
Yeah, and I guess just being clear on what it is that what your purpose is, in all of this, and what messages you do want to be putting out there. I think
Yeah,
having some reflection on that and self-development and really getting to the root of that can be a big help.
you need to get to the root of that,
Because
I
then
think.
when you
Yeah,
are banned or when you do come up against, the adversity, then you can just be really strong in your foundation of like, well, this is why I'm doing this.
yeah, that work is
And sort of
definitely
deciding
worthwhile.
how you're showing up
Yeah, like
in
what's
that post or whatever.
exactly, yeah. Just figure out like what's the story that you are here to tell, that's specifically your experience and your story. That can be really, really helpful to ground you. And then once you got that, then like the things that you do just kind of emanate from that inner light, you know,
Mm.
that inner story. Because it's like that is true of people. Like everyone is driven by that. Usually by one or two events in their childhood that have been massively impactful, and then people create a whole life out of that, and they're constantly drawing from that, whether it's conscious or unconscious. You just make it conscious, and then you can, we could do a show about like the sound of wet cardboard on a metal gate. It still would be what I believe in. Like, or we could do, standing up for like, you know, people who are being persecuted by our right wing government right now. Like, we now got another like right wing government in that's disguised as like some sort of like slightly to the
Not right
left,
wing.
and they're like they're anti-trans. It's disgusting. I hate it. It's just a big charade. But so we could do a video on that. But we would still be coming from our core in those two
Mm.
themes. But they may be completely
That
different. But
core story, that core identity.
yeah,
But that can change as well, can't it? That can
true.
shift. as you go through different experiences. And yeah, we're constantly shedding and growing and shedding and growing and shedding,
Yeah,
death and rebirth.
yeah,
But yeah, you said something interesting the other day. Actually, you were talking about going to meet up with a friend and having to decide which mask you're going to wear. You know, how to show up in that. Am I going to demask, or am I going to wear the mask of a successful composer, or wear the mask of someone who's going through a really difficult time? And it's like it's all true, but which one do we present? I think is an interesting thing to think about as well. It's been on my
yeah,
mind quite a lot.
yeah. That's true. Well, I guess like the branding is masking, isn't it?
Mm.
You know, you're making choices based upon the adapting to different situations. Sometimes you need to protect yourself more in certain situations and less in others. So you have to sort of use your intuition, I think.
Mm.
I got diagnosed, like so many women get diagnosed late with ADHD, and things kind of fall into place. Lots and lots of things are explained, and it's a huge relief. I'm I'm still sort of on the fence on, do you need a diagnosis to understand these things? But I think in reality, in our society, you do, because we're so sort of conditioned to believe that we have to work 9 to 5, a specific routine, and that's what everyone should do, be able to do. That's just being adult. And it's sad that you kind of have to pathologize the idea that if you can't do that, there's a disorder. I think that we need to move away from that. But nevertheless, it's a real relief when you realize, oh, it isn't just me that is just unable to fit into that sort of pattern. And I guess because if you decide to work 9 to 5 as a neurodivergent person, you're sort of constantly working against yourself. Um, you're sort of setting yourself up to fail all the time. Um, like the way I think the biggest thing I've realized is that it's not only that my brain isn't linear and it's quite chaotic and it's quite creative, all these things, but it's also the longer term cycles I have. So I will be very hyper focused and very productive and very excited and very energetic for a while. And that can last, a couple of days, weeks, even a couple of months if I'm lucky. But then I will burn out. Like I will get really, really fatigued, and I will have moments of intense fatigue where I have to rest. Otherwise, it gets worse. And I don't think, well, A, I didn't realize, obviously. So I was tired all the time. Um, and B, I think you just get sort of forced to, I mean, what can you do if you have to if you have to work for a living? You're just gonna have to keep on going. We're just not set up like that. Yeah. So it's been a real realization in terms of my creativity.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I mean, I haven't been diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I'm autistic. I tried to go down the route of getting a diagnosis, but was just sort of invalidated, by my GP. And it's like you say, it's do I need a diagnosis, or is it going to make that much different? I've kind of put it on the back burner for now. And that's why, the piece that you submitted to Orange's Journal that we published
Yes.
resonated so much with me, because it is just, there's a, possibility of invalidation down that road that it's just, I'm not really willing to take that risk, or, risk my own sort of emotional
Yeah, and it's
well-being,
tough.
really.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of prepared. So I was pretty certain I was ADHD, but I wasn't sure about the autism. But my psychiatrist said, no, go for both, because, well, she felt like some of my obsessiveness, I think, fit into there. But I was really lucky. I mean, I went private, lucky enough to be able to do that, and the assessing psychiatrist for the neurodivergence was very good, and she was very honest and said, our system is really crude. Um, just the idea of having these two monolithic, like ADHD or autism or both. And she also said what you need to remember is that a diagnosis is a particular benchmark. Like in that essay, I think at the end I show there's a kind of scoring scale where, you know, if you score more than 7 on this, then you're autistic. If you score 6, then you're not, which is absurd.
Yeah.
And she also said, so we can't. So diagnosis is where we feel that it impacts significantly on your life. And again, it's like, well, what do you might mean by impact? But, I'm a fairly highly functioning adult. Does that mean I'm not neurodivergent because I've sort of put in enough things in place to be functioning?
Yeah, or you've structured your life and
Yeah.
your work and your, the cycles that you were talking about. You've structured everything around that. How is
Well,
that
that's
not an
why.
impact?
Yeah, and that's why I don't work in an office. Like I tried it for you. If I'd worked in an office, I probably would have a lot of mental health problems that I don't have, because I've been lucky enough to be able to structure my life to fit me. So that was interesting. Her honesty was really good. And so I got that diagnosis with autistic trait. And she also said, you're a woman, so you've been socialized differently. Therefore, our scales are very much still, of course, like
Gendered.
everything, like seat belts on, fit male bodies and not female bodies. The autism scale fits male brains better than female brains. She said, maybe you've just learned to mask. Maybe if I saw you as a kid, I would have diagnosed you. So I just find it really interesting. Not just for me, because I don't have a problem with my diagnosis. I'm very happy to have the ADHD. I think that is, in those two sort of monolithic ideas, that is where I fit the best. But I think in the end we have to talk about traits rather than these two kind of diagnoses. But we all have different traits, and I've got really good friends with ADHD that are really different. That have very different, traits in terms of their ADHD.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
fitting everyone into one or the other categories.
Yeah.
It's just not really how human beings work or our brains work. So how does the ADHD impact your creative process specifically, and how have you had to adapt that process?
So I think that it's taken me longer to realize my creativity, realize how to use my creativity, even though I wanted to for a long time. I found it very hard. And I think that's partly because I tried to fit my creativity into the model of 9 to 5. So I wanted to write. So I thought, okay, well then I have to write. I have to sit down and write every day, 9 to 5, like someone that goes to the office. If I don't do that, then I'm a failed writer, or whatever. And of course now I just realised, looking back at, I did manage to squeeze out a novel published at the age of 46.
Amazing.
Diagnosed pretty much the same time as the novel came out. So it's quite a lot of shifts in that year.
Wow.
I realised that that's just not how creativity works in general. I think for most people, certainly not for me, and that if I want to be creative, I need to adapt how I am creative to what works for me. That doesn't mean that I allow myself free rein with this sort of, I only write if I'm inspired, or that sort of thing, because I think that's also problematic, because we're not always, you can't just always wait for inspiration. But again, I tend to have these cycles. So if I know I want to produce materials at the sort of early stages of a writing project, for example, I do force myself to sit down, but in short bursts. So, for example, I would sit down and force myself to write 500 words every morning. And if after 500 words it's not happening, I can go and do something else. Often it is already then flowing, so then I sit for a bit longer. But inevitably, you get tired much, much quicker when you're creative. So, for me, anyway. And I think having the diagnosis as well, I guess, as a book that came out is saying, oh, well, that actually works. Like, that method works. Like, I don't have to force myself to be creative in a different way. And that also means that even though I set up this habit, because there's so much talk about habits of successful people, you know, it's the idea of having a lifetime habit for me is ridiculous. Like, that's just not how my brain works. I'm not going to write 500 words every day for the rest of my life. I probably will do many days of my life, but I will also need time to rest and time to do something else and time to find something else to engage my brain for a bit. And then I might come back to that. So I think that's another insight I've had about being ADHD in particular, is that we don't, or at least my brain doesn't fit into this idea of having good habits that you then pursue for the rest of your life. It just isn't going to happen. And that's the weight off my shoulders, you know.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the way we get conditioned at school, isn't it? You know, like sitting down and doing your homework every day like a good girl, you know, and it's just kind of not realistic. For me, you know, I've had to just become, because I went through a period of really intense burnout last year, and I had to just like change so much about my routine, and I've had to just tune into my energy levels like in a completely new way. And now every day is just kind of checking in with those levels, and then that sort of determines what I can do, you know, that day, what you know, what's available to me really to use. Do you do something similar? Are you sort of checking in with your body more?
I do, very much more so, because I mean, the journey kind of started because I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, although I'm sort of not entirely sure whether that isn't just something that is a result of sort of continued burnout from ADHD, forcing myself into the box kind of thing. And I was doing a lot of exercise for a while, and I was loving it, and I was getting massive endorphin kicks from lifting heavy things, and it was so much fun. But I was feeling ill all the time, constantly feeling like I was going down with the flu. I was really, really tired. I could barely do anything else. My creativity was really suffering. And in the end, I sort of started investigating it, because at first I thought, you know, I can run, I can lift, I can do all these things. I can't possibly have, you know, ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. But it turns out I do have, in particular, this thing called post-exertion malaise, where like it's really difficult to figure out, because it's 48 hours after exertion, or actually high adrenaline. So it can be like psychological exertion. I get flu-like symptoms. My body just goes, this is too much. I get aches and pains, sore throat. And I used to have that all the time, because I was constantly pushing myself and never connecting those symptoms to what I'd been doing. So I've totally scaled back on that. So I kind of realized I can't work, write, socialize and exercise. That's just not possible for my body and mind. That's not going to happen. And I can choose sort of two of those at any time. So I think I do that. I do listen every day, but I also make plans in terms of, okay, for the next, so again comes these longer cycles for me, where like, okay, for the next 3 weeks, I have to do lots of marking. Well, that means I'm not going to do a lot of creativity stuff, or I definitely have to socialize less, because I just can't do it. I'll get too tired. Or say to myself sometimes, you know, yeah, I am going to, you know, go and see my friends, like 2 different friends in one day, for example. But I know the next day I will have to stay in bed all day. And just know that that's coming. And just, so I guess acknowledge that, and then be kind to myself and say that's okay. Well, then the next day you're going to rest. So
Well, there are different kinds of energy as well, aren't there? Like the emotional energy that I think comes with socializing sometimes. There's obviously like the mental energy that I imagine marking must take a lot of. Physical energy.
Yeah, but I'm surprised, for me they all end up as physical fatigue, as in the exertion. So I can feel it now because I've been doing marking and other stuff on top of that for a couple of weeks, and I can feel that like physical heaviness, just fatigue. I just need to sleep or just lie down, and it's not because I've been doing too much physical exercise. So for me, I think that might be the chronic fatigue element to it, or ME element to it. I don't know. People probably know much more about this than me, because obviously mine's very, very mild compared to what a lot of people go through. But it is that sense that almost all exertion, as you said, there are lots of different kinds, social, mental, physical, end up with this physical fatigue that I've got no choice. I kind of have to I have to rest.
And so do you just have to go to bed? Do you have tools for like replenishing that energy, or is it just a case of lying still, doing nothing?
Mainly it's just sleeping a lot. I end up taking days, and my husband's incredibly supportive. And if I say, look, today I just need a day in bed, can you just hold the fort? And he's like, yeah, okay. I mean, obviously he's also working, so it can't happen whenever, but some weekends I'll be just like, I just need to stay in bed, and I'll just sleep the whole day. I also take naps. I'm a massive proponent of the afternoon naps. They're interesting, actually, and I used to feel so guilty about having naps, partly because it's a luxury. People that go to the office can't do it, people that work 9 to 5, but I'm working from home, so I can have a nap on my little sofa. But I realized they're rest, but they also reset my brain, because even if I'm doing fun stuff, even if I'm doing creativity or writing, it feels like my brain goes up in really high gears, and it's almost like fizzing, and it gets too much. And actually just lying down for half an hour, 45 minutes, it's like turning the computer on and off, actually just resets that, and then like in the afternoon I can start afresh. So that really works for me, and again, I've just stopped feeling guilty about it.
Great.
That's what I need to do.
Well, it sounds like it's super important just for your well-being. I mean, I've never been a successful napper. I just find that I get really groggy when I've woken up. Do you have any tips for successful napping?
I know some people can't do it. For me, it's been the find out your sleep cycle. So if you try to wake up within, I think a normal people's sleep cycle vary from sort of 45 minutes to an hour and a half, I think. And mine's very definitely 45 minutes. So I will naturally wake up pretty much after 45 minutes. And I think I've also honed that with setting an alarm, but that is how I worked. I kind of tried different lengths of nap, and that if I do that, I don't feel as groggy. I kind of wake up naturally. So that's my top tip. Figure out, experiment with the length.
I think I can do it if I'm already in a very relaxed state, or if I'm like watching something particular, like the X-Files. I just find I nap quite a lot through that, because it's just got a really subdued tone to it that just puts me in a state.
I've been watching the X-Files recently, actually, in the evenings. It's so relaxing.
Yeah, it's just the tone and the way they talk, and it just sends me off. So talking about, I'm trying to think of a good segue, talking about things that take a lot of energy, can we talk about social media?
Yes.
You building this amazing brand, which is just, talk about that.
Well, so first of all, I think it's a great segue, because social media is so exhausting if you're doing it seriously, or as a brand. I guess I sort of when you asked me about to come on this podcast and said how you're building your brand, I was like, oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah, how do you feel about the word brand, by the way? I know it can...
Yeah, I find it, I was slightly sort of disconcerted, but I don't mind it because I guess that means I'm doing something right. It's an unfortunate word because it obviously has like very commercial connotations,
Has
and I don't feel like,
baggage.
I don't feel like my brand is primarily to sell things. Although, I mean, I did start the Instagram very specifically when I knew the book was coming out, and I thought, okay, I'm going to just build up a following, see what happens. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and I still don't. But it's developed from there. I'm just sort of kind of trying to figure out the progression. I think what happens was I realized I had to be on Bookstagram, and then I looked at lots of Bookstagrammers, connected. They're a really lovely community mostly. I connected with a lot of them. So then I just started taking those photos, but kind of querying them in my captions. And I guess I started looking more at what people were doing on Instagram, in particular women and self-portraits and self-portraiture photography in general. And I guess it also was connected for me to aging, and feeling like, oh, am I allowed to do this? Can I still do this? Can I get away with it? Oh, I have to do it before, I become too old. All these sort of strange thoughts. And I thought, yeah, I just want to investigate that. So that's how it's been rolling. And I've been inspired by, nude photography that I've seen, in particular self-photography, but also other stuff. So the mask thing came in particular from a Ben Hopper photo called Betty on the Beach, I think. It's a young woman in in a latex unicorn mask on Brighton Beach. And I mean, it's been viral before because it's such a fantastic photo with this kind of, I really loved the juxtaposition between the mask and the naked body. And I think that then started all this querying about masks, and I guess that is part of that is the neurodivergence masking as a neurotypical, and masking to fit into certain situations. But I also realized that pretty much everyone masks, and we all have personas. We all wear these masks, even when we're naked. Even when you're posing naked, perhaps you're even almost even more wearing a mask in certain situations. Definitely on Instagram, right? You can see that these things are sort of performances. So I guess then it became like an investigation and a query into that, and that sense that I in particular don't feel strongly that there is such a thing as an authentic self that everyone has, and that somewhere inside of you. But I think we are all a construction, whether that's partly genetics, partly upbringing, partly choice. But I find that quite freeing, that for me, it means that even though I know I have to wear masks in society, I can choose those masks. I can choose who I want to be. And I guess it's about finding the place where you can be free to choose the masks that you like. But it's also that is also what I want to investigate, the fact that all the masks we wear are kind of part of ourselves, for better and for worse. So that's been the thing. And I think that is where the brand, I think that's where the brand is the strongest, right? Because they're such striking photos. And I think they work. But there's also other strands. And that was something I also thought of when you asked me about the brand. It's like, well, I'm constantly thinking maybe I should be even, should I just do those photos on Instagram? Should it be very sort of curated aesthetically? Because that tends to be how people tell you to build a brand.
Right.
Stick to a niche.
Just do one thing.
Do your one thing. Give your audience what they want. I don't think I can do that. Like that again, my brain would get too bored. So there's like a few things, but I'm trying to curate them a little bit. I've just started to try to curate them even more. So every third photo on Instagram is a specific strand of that, so it looks better aesthetically. I don't know how long I'm going to keep that up, because I keep periodically think I will. But I don't think I would be able to be just sort of one-sided and just do the photos or just do the books or yeah. I'm not a brand manager, thank God. I think I should. That's probably a really bad thing, doing lots of different things.
We'd really love it if you could help us to grow the podcast and grow the community. So if there's anyone you have in your life who you think might enjoy Pivotal Slice, please do recommend. It goes a long way.
It does, and you can subscribe to our Patreon for as little as £3. You can also pay a bit more and get exclusive episodes and juicy content.
Or if you fancy buying us a coffee, that would help us a lot to keep growing and give us a little energy boost.
You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, Audible. You can rate us on Spotify, and you can engage us on YouTube by liking, commenting, and subscribing. This will go a long way in moving through the algorithm universe.
You know, because I think we can be quite hard on ourselves, can't we, about masking? I know I have been thinking about all the different masks that I've worn to like fit in with different groups of people over the years, and thinking, oh, well, I should just not have any masks and just be myself and be authentic. And you're right that that whole sort of authentic self concept is maybe quite limiting as well, in a way.
Yeah, especially the way it's been touted, well, on social media in particular, you know, this sort of be yourself, find yourself, be your authentic self. I mean, that in itself becomes such a pressure to be something. And I mean, partly, maybe it is because I've now accepted that my brain is so changing and kind of needs constant input and constant novelty. I know I can't just be one thing. I know I will always change, and that's me. But yeah, I think it is important, and I think it's an important conversation to have within the neurodivergence discourse conversation, is masking and not feeling bad about masks. Because I know people feel incredibly bad about the way they're masking and hate their masks. And I'm not saying there aren't masks that are hateful and horrible that people have to put on in order to survive. But I think people are also, as you say, like incredibly hard on themselves. But yeah, to be something that's incredibly difficult to be, and I don't think it's achievable for anyone, really. So accepting the fact that you've got several masks, and maybe just working with the idea that you can tweak those, you can make those the best parts of you. It probably works better for me in general.
And, you know, use the word survival, and that's what it's about, really, isn't it? It's all of these functions that the masks sort of serve. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. I was literally just earlier thinking about a time when I saw like an old work colleague out when I was walking, and thinking about how I switched into this completely different persona, and like feeling kind of bad about it, like, oh, I was just being really fake and, you know, kind of people pleasing, you know. And it's just like, well, no, that's what I needed to do to just survive that situation.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Exactly. And I still feel that, like, as a writer and someone who's sort of chosen to be more publicly visible in the last few years, I do more networking than I've ever done before. Usually I try to do that in circles where I feel comfortable, but inevitably I will come back home and go, like have that ick of having been schmoozing with people And I've learned the way I've started dealing with it is if I go to an event where I know that might happen, or I have to put on that kind of mask, which I know maybe isn't entirely comfortable, I think about, why am I doing this? Is it because I need to make a contact, or, what is my aim here? If that is really important, that I need to, I need to make contact with these people and I have to put a mask on to do that, then I limit it. I go, okay, well, I'll talk to one or two people. That's enough. Like, I don't have to stay till the bitter end and pretend I'm something I'm not. So I think limiting that exposure has helped me. But also, yeah, as I said, choosing the networks that work better for me than not.
And have you found a lot of new networks and communities through the work that you're doing on Instagram, through this image that you're curating?
Yeah, like, it's been fantastic. Because part of me obviously think, like, social media is so unreal. It takes too much time. It's not good for mental health. And all that is true. If you're not doing it kind of with awareness. And I think I'm lucky that I am a certain age, particular, that I've, partly because I didn't grow up with social media, so I kind of have a slightly distanced view of it, and partly because I have a kind of feeling of who I am outside of it, and I just choose what to show of that, and how to present that on social media, and that has just led to really, really good things. Like, there's been very, very little negative feedback. I mean, nothing really, but I have met so many wonderful people through social media that I've then met in real life, become friends, or just kept in touch with, people. I mean, in particular, I've been, trying to get in touch with other writers, poets, etc. And I just have read so many wonderful books and works from people, and they've read mine. And I have also sold my book, but it's not just about selling. It's also just having people say, oh, I read your book and it's really, I really enjoyed it. And I thought, oh, wow. And it's, that wouldn't have happened without social media. So I think that's quite powerful these days. And we have to embrace it as creators. I don't like that word either, but as people in the doing creative things, whatever it is you're doing, I think it is something that can be used for good. And I know a lot of people feel the same. But as I said, there needs to be a sort of awareness of what you're doing, I think. Because, and I guess this is also why I'm doing the photographs and trying to interrogate that. There is a creep of starting to believe that the photo, that, the social media image is real. Or rather, I guess it's because I was thinking about this the other day, how if you see something, say fashion, like if you see a piece of clothing that you find really ugly, but you see it enough times photographed, whether it's, in print media or on TV or whatever, in good situations, you start feeling like you like it. It is really, like, representation matters. Like, what the visual content that we consume matters to what we think about things, which is why social media can also be extremely damaging and insipid, of course, politically, aesthetically, to women, minorities, etc. But it can also be empowering. So I think one has to make an effort. How to sort of balance that effort with real life. I think probably everyone has to find their own way. Yeah.
Do you think it's about having an intention? Like, is part of your intention about that representation that you were just talking about?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the creative work that I've done in terms of the photographs have actually really helped me hone that intention, maybe in a way that I wouldn't have. Because sure, I also put, I put book reviews or books or I put a lot of selfies of myself wearing clothes, which is just a bit of fun, really, and nice, it's nice looking nice. But I think then also doing the photography and really thinking through images and what images mean, and how I present myself, and being very, very aware of the fact that every single photo I put on Instagram is curated by me in a very specific way, has made me, much more aware of what I'm doing than probably the average Instagram bear. Yeah.
And I'm interested to know, do you think about that when you're actually taking the photos? Do you think about that intention and the message? Like how do you actually show up, like when you're doing these shoots?
Yeah. Well, obviously there's different things. Like there are some more, as I said, like the outfits and stuff is just kind of taking photos in my mirror. That's not so difficult. But the more arty stuff, I guess, yeah, that's very much intention. And so actually, if I can self-promote a bit, I'm writing about it at the moment. There's going to be a little pamphlet about this whole process of Instagram nude selfies that I've gone through, by a very small publisher called Intergraphia Press. Later this year, it's going to come out. So I've used that space to think this through quite a lot. And what I realized was that one of the things I really like about this project and taking photographs of myself naked in masks is because of the labor I put in. And so I have an idea, I think about it for quite a long time, think about different ways I could do it. I set up, and it's become more elaborate, I guess. As I've become more sophisticated, like I've got a background, I've got a tripod, it's kind of, I've added a bit of gear, but I'm trying to keep it fairly minimalist. And then I set it all up, and of course I start taking photos. So people have asked me, like, who takes the photos? it's just me. It's Timer. It's all. It's just it's an app that will snap away. I can set the interval, all the settings, and I will take probably initially. I will start off take maybe like 25, 50 photos posing behind, then I'll go and have a look and I'll see what it looks like. And obviously then I do adjustments and I keep on taking photos. And every shoot probably ends up being, well, definitely in the hundreds of photos. And that is kind of the old style, how one worked with photography. Although that was because of film to a certain extent, but because I can't see the final product as I'm posing because it's the camera taking the photo, I kind of have to go through. So then I end up with these, again, in essence, like old style contact sheets, right? I just have lots and lots of small thumbnails, and I go through them and I weed them out and I weed them out and I weed them out. That is a really laborious process, but I think that's been an incredibly interesting and lovely and enriching process, because I've had to look at hundreds and hundreds of photos of my own body, some that I like, a lot of them that I don't like. But again, there's something about representation, right? We don't see our own bodies in photographs. We see everyone else, we see lots of other bodies, very perfect bodies in photographs, but we don't see our own bodies. But doing that and just seeing it changes the way you view it. It changes the way you view yourself, your body. I guess it does give you a distance. Maybe it's something about becoming an object of art. But I really like that feeling of then finding that, seeing myself as a body and a beautiful body rather than something that needs to be fixed or whatever, but more as an object of art. But then also having the agency of going, no, this is how I'm going to present myself. No, I'm going to delete that one, do this one. And then once I've chosen some photos, then I end up editing them a bit. I have played around, obviously, with some of them. I've deliberately used AI and then compared what AI does to me versus the reality. And that's been quite interesting as well. And I became very, very aware of the fact that I became more critical, for example, of my own face and like imperfection in my own face, because I was using a lot of Facetune and like taking out spots. I still do that if I've got a big spot on my nose. But then, of course, you know, you look in the mirror and you're not, you know, you're not the person that you see on Instagram. So I'm also aware of that creep. But I think that process of then having to look at myself in so many different ways and understanding the process of photographing a body has just been incredibly helpful for the way I see myself, I think. Yeah, I mean, also, I mean, there's also been like this very simple thing that you realize that you know, the bodies that we see in media are just so manipulated. I mean, let alone AI and digital retouching, all that. So just the pose, just an angle makes a huge difference in how a body looks. And I think just realizing that is like, it's kind of a relief as well. You're like, oh, okay, this is what they're doing. Like, it's almost like it's a magic trick that's being revealed, right?
It's a hack.
Like, yeah, it's like, this is not, I get it, it's not real. So that's been fun and interesting. But of course, then I like immediately have this like guilt of, should I be doing it? Should I be perpetuating these like patriarchal poses? And that's something I'm writing through at the moment. Probably end up writing more about it, because it's just so complex in terms of the urges of, you know, wanting to break the system, but look beautiful at the same time.
Well, like you said, it's nice to look nice. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
From the way you describe it, I can tell that you just approach this whole process with curiosity and openness, and I'm sure that is a big help, because even seeing the images of yourself that you don't like, or you know, the imperfections that you're not happy with, you're still just kind of being present with that and like being curious with it, rather than being lost in a spiral of feeling bad about the way you look. So I'm sure that must help.
I think you're right. I think the openness and curiosity is, it's like so important. And I think it's the reason I've been able to do that in particular, I think, in terms of photography, is because it's not kind of what I thought of as my main form of creativity. And I still don't think it is my main form of creativity, but that is liberating. Like, I don't want to be a professional photographer. I don't want a career in photography. I don't need to pretend that I'm professional. I just do it because it's interesting at the moment. And I've tried to approach more creative pursuits like that. Whereas before, when I was younger in particular, I think whatever I tried, I wanted to learn to perfection. And not only is that extremely tiring, also impossible, but also really boring. It's just, you know. So that's been a really nice shift as well. And I wonder whether that's part of the journey towards ADHD. I hasten to say that it's not just the diagnosis per se, because the diagnosis is like part of that process. It's not just like the diagnosis was the turning point, but it was this sort of trying to, as you said, sit with things, sit with feelings, sit with the curiosity, not try to determine or fix or perfect, but just sort of sit with the process.
Just notice it all, you know, just noticing the guilt rather than being swallowed up by it.
Noticing all the emotions and like allowing them to be. And and the curiosity, like going, so why? You know, I think part of critiquing patriarchy in a way that is productive is to consider how internalized some of those emotions are, some of those ideas are, and that is far more useful than sort of grandstanding or trying to upend things. Although we need to do that as well, obviously. We need some riots and revolutions. But in terms of sort of our minds, it's also about sitting of like, okay, well, what's within me? How's that? How do I need to change that or reflect on that? I guess to start a wider change, maybe. Oh, that came out very deep.
It's getting deep now. Well, I'm interested in what you just said about, there's less pressure on you because you don't want to be a photographer, like, as that one thing. Is there one thing that you see yourself as, or is it just lots of different creative pursuits? Like, do you see yourself as a writer primarily?
Yeah,
or
I think I primarily see myself as a writer, although I think that is that is slightly sort of blurring at the edges. But I think I'll always present myself as a writer, partly because that was one of the catalysts of feeling better about myself, was going, yeah, no, actually I'm a writer, and telling people I'm a writer, not making excuses of saying, oh yeah, well, I'm a kind of academic that kind of does freelance stuff, but I also write. So, no, I'm a writer. Kind of own one thing. And again, although I know I've got loads of other masks and personas, I think that's my main, that's where I feel most comfortable. And I think that's got to do with mastery as well. That is, something I have become good at because I've done it a lot. So it's a comfortable space. But that doesn't mean, I don't think I find it limiting. Just because I'm a writer doesn't mean I can't take photos. Or indeed do some drawing or make some masks or all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, and dipping your toe into the visual world of art as well, I think is what makes your brand, to use that word again, so powerful to me. Is that, I've noticed through running Orange's Journal, when I started the journal, Twitter was like the main place for writers to sort of, get their work out there and form communities. But now obviously Twitter is just this big mess, and lots of people have left it, and there's been this big migration over to Instagram. Way more writers now sending me their Instagram pages to share their work than there ever used to be. But I think with that comes the reality that, Instagram is a visual platform.
Yeah, that was a big problem for me actually at first.
Yeah, and I think a lot of writers maybe haven't considered that enough, or including myself. I don't really know how to promote myself on Instagram because it's so visual, and it's like you were saying, do I just put my face on there? Is that what people want? How to know?
I think that is really problematic for the writing community. Because I was on Twitter years and years and years ago when it was still a nice place. And there was a lovely community. And then I sort of stepped away from social media for quite a while, and then started the Instagram, as I said, when the book was coming out, and sort of made a decision that I didn't want to go back to Twitter for various reasons. But I was constantly thinking, oh, I should be on Twitter because I'm a writer. That's what, that's what everyone says. I just didn't feel it. And now I'm happy I didn't go there because it all just sort of imploded. But you're right. The Bookstagram is, as I said, a nice community, and that kind of works. And it seems to be a great amount of people just love looking at pictures of books.
Yeah.
So that works. And I think as an author, a writer, you have to choose whether that is the niche that you're going to go for, or whether you're going to try something else. And I think Instagram there is quite a lot of room for experimentation. And I guess that's what I did to such an extent at the beginning, like try different things and saw what worked. But it is, I can see how it's a real problem for some writers, because if you're not into the visual, then, what do you put up there? And people don't, that's, again, you need to, remember people don't really read the captions unless they're really into your stuff. So you can't you can presume that they'll understand. which I think is kind of interesting with my photos as well, because I think there is a large amount of people who see them and don't think about the sort of subtext of them. And I'm now more and more thinking like how do they, how do the photos come across to people who don't know anything about me or my project? And also, how do I take photos that somehow convey what I'm trying to say? Do I convey? I have no idea. I just know people do respond to them. I mean, mainly what's been nice and also interesting is that I started this, and as I said, felt loads of shame and discomfort. I thought, no, this is ridiculous. I can't be showing my tits on the internet as a writer at my age, yada yada. But then there'd be like a woman in my circle of friends or acquaintances that I really admired or felt comfortable with. They would come to me personally and say, I really love what you're doing on Instagram, or I showed these photos to my friends because they're so great. And I'm like, well, why didn't you say anything on Instagram? Because obviously that's how you expect people to communicate
Right.
when you're on social media. But there's actually quite a large audience out there that doesn't. But they're, I'm not saying there's been loads of people, but there've been like a handful of people who, and it keeps on happening, who I meet in real life and they go, oh my God, I've loved the stuff you're doing online. And that's really, really lovely. It's really nice to hear. And that's when I thought, no, well, if I've got 3 people that come to me and go, I really like your photos, I'm happy with that. I'll just keep on going. Well, I don't know what that kind of tells us about social media. I think you just have to persevere with, I think this is not just social media, right? This is just being creative and doing whatever you're doing. You just have to believe in it and keep going.
Just keep doing
and
it.
Good things will happen.
Because you're like, I think what you're saying as well is you're unaware of the impact a lot of the time. There's a ripple effect with what you're doing that it's not always visible in the metrics and the comments and the likes. So that's really powerful. I think to me it's just this very strong sort of punk feminist message about just showing up as yourself, and everything that you're saying about female bodies. And I think for me, because I work in the charity sector supporting victims of abuse, different forms of sexual abuse, and we talk a lot about online and image-based abuse. And so I think for me there's something about sharing nudes we associate a lot of the time with these kind of abusive situations. And those images can be exploited in so many ways, and especially female bodies. So for me it's just something about reclaiming that as well, and
it's reclaiming the space,
for sure,
in its simplest form as well for the female body. And also for me it is very much sort of a middle-aged female body that isn't perfect, but is reclaiming a place that I rightly or wrongly feel that maybe I shouldn't be there. But I'm really pleased to hear that that's how it comes across, as a feminist, slightly rebellious place, because that's kind of me. That's kind of what I want to say.
Great.
I'm really pleased. As I said, I think good things happen. Like you asked me to come on this. People asked me to write about it. And as I said, I've met lots of writers in real life through the social media. So there's lots of communities. And I think ultimately, although social media is important for the brand, I think I want to add that what really makes you happy is those face-to-face communications. It's when people come and say, I really like your photos. Or if you go out and meet, you see someone's poems or books online, and then you go and hear a reading, and that meet some people who also like the same literature as you do in real life, and it's just super nice. I think that as a creative person, that's where your joy has to come from, because as I've experienced, And I'm sure people who have published books traditionally with, big publishers probably feel the same. Mine is a very small publisher, but it doesn't really bring you a lot of pleasure. It's just out there. Like so there's this sort of disjunct. It's like you don't really have a connect with your audience. So having those small spaces and those conversations, whether that's online or in real life, with people who like your work and whose work you like, and creating communities around that is, I think, the way to go as an artist in any kind of discipline.